Okay, well, welcome to the Admissions Director panel as part of the CentreCourt MBA Festival. Now, before I introduce this stellar panel, let's find out a little bit of our audience. Who's applying to business school for next September, next fall? All right, and true to the sort of origins of CentreCourt, who would consider themselves a poet? And who's a quant? All right, so we're going to be finding out what your GMAT score is and if you can walk that walk later on. So the idea, of course, is to find out a lot more about that process of applying to business schools and have a wonderful cross-section of the top schools that are with us here in DC this afternoon, starting with Katie Lloyd, who's the Executive Director of MBA Admissions at Georgia Tech in Charlotte. Mm-hmm. So we'll be talking about that convergence of technology and business that the school does so well. Perhaps the most fashionable member of our audience, Tyler Henderson, who is...
That's never been said before.
We should be asking the audience that. Tyler is the director for North America for Stabaconi out of Milan in Italy. Sujin Kwan, who is now, your job titles, I've known you for years, and you're now the managing director of the MBA program and everything, right, at Michigan Ross.
The full-time MBA program, yes.
Delighted to have you with us. And Donna Clark, who perhaps is one of the closest to the DC event, also with a new campus. Donna is the Director of Admissions, or perhaps Associate Dean of Admissions, get the title right?
Close enough.
At UVA's Darden School of Business, who just opened a new spot across the river. All right, so hopefully you'll be hosting us the next time. It's been quite a turbulent year. I mean, applications to business school, rising for the last 4 or 5 years. At a school like Georgia Tech, what have you been seeing recently?
Yeah, so can everyone hear me okay? They said that we had to project. So yes, actually our applications have been trending up, even though international applications are historically universally down. Our domestic applications have been up. I think we position ourselves at the intersection of business and technology, and that's really resonated with candidates. And we've seen, especially with women and underrepresented minorities, our numbers doubled this year in both of those areas. So we've been really excited about the application volume, and we expect to see that continue. So we feel pretty good. We would like to see our international numbers go back up again, but right now, from a domestic pool, overall, we were up last year. So.
And do you find that candidates are really sort of making that connection of business and technology and what they're then looking for at a school like Charlotte?
We do, and what we try to say is you don't have to have a background in technology, but we prepare you to be able to speak that language once you're finished. And so we find that about 40% of our students come in with some type of STEM background, but really from the rest of the perspective, it's either business or liberal arts or sciences, a very wide range of backgrounds. So they really are looking to Scheller to either get a little bit of an education in that area or to pivot and make a big change into technology once they're finished with the program.
So the language of technology, and of course in Milan, the language of love and fashion and luxury and finance. I mean, Milan is a dynamic center within Europe. And the European business schools have seen a growing demand in the last few years, particularly from the US market, Tyler.
Yeah, it's true. The issue that I think you're having in attracting international applicants, we've seen the inverse in Europe. International applicants go up and continue to go up for, let's say, a multitude of reasons, both from the North American market and, let's say, other international markets that are historically focused on the U.S. as a destination for MBAs, a pretty dramatic rise as well. I would say both logistical in a way, because European programs are 1 year long relative to most U.S. programs being 2, and I'll tread a little bit lightly here in D.C., but some geopolitical reasons as well.
Yeah, nobody talks politics in D.C., right? So we can go there. But it is. I mean, you talk about the 1 year program, but for both the U.S. market, I mean, that at certain stages of their career, that's a very attractive proposition too.
Yeah, it is. I mean, the average age of a European MBA is going to be often north of 30, and it's hard for me to guess people's ages, but certainly it's a little bit easier to justify a 2-year educational commitment age 24 than it would be at 32, which is sort of the nice thing about the broad scope of MBA options throughout the world, that there actually are options for just about anyone at just about any age, at just about any profile, which both makes our jobs more difficult and a little bit easier at the same time.
Sujin, we both of us have been through enough admission cycles now, the ups and the downs. But when you see a sort of a 4%, 6% fall, that sort of froth that sort of falls away. But I mean, the core of those that are, really look at business school as the next steps for their career transition. At a school like Ross, that's remained stable, if not stronger than ever, right, in terms of the
Yeah,
quality.
we've actually enjoyed, up until this year, 3 years of continuous growth. And so we've been really fortunate in seeing our applications grow. Until this past year, we were flat with US, but in the international, slightly down. What we were really excited about, though, was the increase in quality of the applications that we saw. So it's really strong applicants who are wanting to come to business school, people with really great work experience, with great life experiences, great academics. So we were very excited with the pool that we saw this year.
Right, quality, but better than ever, and also then diversifying your portfolio and now launching an online MBA for.
That's right.
Is that to address a very distinct part of the audience, or is there an overlap with those that might also be looking at the full-time program at Ross?
Well, it's to attract candidates who want greater flexibility so that they don't need to travel and give up 2 years of their life. So the online program, which is going to launch next fall, it's designed to widen the net and still give them the same breadth of experience that we have, the quality of experience that we have for the full-time MBA program. They'll have 3 residencies, and they will have the action-based learning that our full-time MBA program students experience as well.
Right. Round 1 last year can't have been the easiest round that you've ever been through, Donna, but I mean, since then, round 2 numbers have been strong, and as you go into this new year, as enthusiastic as ever for applications coming to Darden?
We're really excited. We just introduced a new early action round this year at Darden, and are really pleased with both the quantity and quality of applicants that we've received so far for early action. We have round 2 coming up around the corner in October, round 1 in October and round 2 in January. But yeah, off to a really good start.
Now, in terms of the statement, because Columbia has early decision, I guess Tuck and Duke also offer early action. What is that sending you as a signal, as an admissions office, if someone is applying early action?
So Darden's early action round is non-binding, so it might be a little unique in that way. I think for an applicant's perspective, it's a great way to signal that Darden may be your first choice or one of your first choices. One of the things I hear frequently in the Darden community is we want students who really want to be here, and early action is not the only way to signal that, but it is a way to signal that. So having worked at schools in the past that had early action, I'm a big fan of it, and so it's a new experiment for Darden, but we're excited about it.
Right. At one of these events recently, we had someone that came up to the schools and explained that their GPA was identical to the average GPA of the school they were talking to, that their GMAT was identical to the average GMAT of the school, that they were even the same age as the average age of the incoming class, and these very reductive figures that we generate in class profiles. So if we pull back that curtain of admissions, I mean, you're not just saying, well, you've got these numbers, you're in, you're out. Talk us through at Scheller a sort of a typical day in the life of your admissions office and how those decisions are made.
Well, yeah, focusing on the decisions is one thing, and then what the day in the life looks like is very different. But as far as the decisions go, we have about a 2-month turnaround time from the time that you would submit application to the time that you would hear a decision. And so about 3 to 5 weeks after you submit the decision, to submit the application, you would be hearing about whether or not you've been selected to interview. And then we have an interview day in each round, 2 days that you can choose from to come on campus, and then you participate in the interview, and then in a couple of other activities. And then probably about 3 weeks after that, you would be hearing a decision. And then depending upon which round, you have either about a month or 2 months to decide. The earlier rounds are shorter. But we read applications really quickly once they come in, and then extend those interviews because we want you to have as much time as possible to make the plans to be able to come visit campus. And we do feel like visiting campus for those interview days is a critical part of helping you make that decision.
And it's a collective we.
Yes.
In terms of initial readers and then the discussions of those different profiles.
Yes, so we have about 8 people on our team, and everybody reads applications. And as far as the admissions committee, in addition to the readers, it's also a faculty member, the director of career of the career team, and then another associate dean. So we do have about about 12 people on the admissions committee when we are making those decisions.
Right. From the European perspective, and perhaps for the US audience that's here today, and then the wider audience that we're streaming with, are you looking for that sort of international dimension, Tyler, and how might an applicant best sort of convey that?
Yeah, so that's gonna fall in sort of one of two categories. This is of high importance to us. Sort of, we would call it global proficiency, and a pretty normal, let's say, European profile. I'm from Germany. I went to university in the UK. I've been working in Singapore and speak 3 languages, and on and on and on. Right? That's a pretty normal sort of European profile. That looks different from North America, right? It's a big country, lots of universities. Oftentimes, people's global exposure is quite limited. Maybe I did a semester abroad or a short study term abroad, or maybe just even a little bit of travel. And what we want to understand from applicants in those situations is why I aspire for a more global career and how I think staying in my home country will not help me move in that way, right? Because we don't want to say, well, you have to have spent X percentage of your life abroad in order to be qualified for our MBA program. We think that's not fair, actually. So for, let's say, if any of you is thinking, or out in the internet ether, kind of thinking about a European program with limited international exposure, the focus for you would be, how do I express my desire to be a more international worker, international citizen, and how doing an MBA program abroad can move me in that direction. It's much more nuanced than sort of ticking some boxes to say this is what I've done, but we are completely open to those sort of profiles because we know, in a way, those are the people that have the most life-changing experience by coming to an MBA out of their home country.
Right. Sujin, you came up with your Excel skills are probably far better than mine, but an interesting spreadsheet that would let an applicant both sort of self-reflect some of the things that they're looking for in a business school and how they can sort of chart that. Can you talk us through, some of the things that candidates might be looking for as they then, consider Ross and the other top schools?
So it's important that people come up with their own list of criteria. There is not something that I can tell you should look at these five things in every school, because what you're looking for is going to be really different from candidate to candidate. So coming up with that spreadsheet, it's the idea of the self-reflection piece, as you just mentioned. What are the things that I want to get out of the business school experience? What kind of students do I want to go to school with? What kind of learning approach do I want? How involved do I want to get in the extracurriculars and the co-curriculars? What specialization areas are the schools good at? And then have those down the rows, and then across the columns, compare all the schools to see how they rate on the dimensions that are really important to you. And you can do that best, of course, by visiting, but also by talking to students and alumni. Most schools will have student ambassadors or alumni ambassadors, and you should reach out to them to really validate the things that schools say on their website or that recruiters like us talk about, and then get a real good sense for how is this experience going to be for me on the dimensions that really matter to me.
As part of that self-reflection, Donna, Tyler made the point about at what stage in your career you might consider, the 1 and 2 year programs. As you look at crafting that diversity, can you be too young or too old, for a full-time MBA program?
I guess I think about it less in terms of age and more in terms of experience level. So is it possible that somebody is too inexperienced maybe to contribute to and benefit greatly from the MBA program? I think that there are those instances. There are instances when I wouldn't really characterize it as somebody being too old, but perhaps an EMBA format would be better suited to them. Maybe they would rather be in class with their with their peer group as opposed to a student group that's significantly younger. But especially in schools that emphasize, a lot of class participation, you want to go in with confidence that you can contribute to the classroom and have enough life and work experience to draw from. But also, obviously to gain from others who are expressing their opinions too.
Right. And Katie, in terms of the 31, 32, 33-year-old, plenty of examples, certainly examples of them in business school. Mm-hmm. Are you then looking at the career transition that they're looking to make and how achievable, how coherent that might be at that stage in their career? If they tell you they want to go into strategy consulting at the age of 33 or 34, That's a tough ask for a company like McKinsey, right?
Absolutely. So we take a coaching approach in the application process as well as once our students are there. So we really want to bring in students who are going to be best matched to the opportunities that Georgia Tech Scheller would provide. So when you look at, and there are a lot of employers that are coming into MBA programs that they're going to be offering this type of job because they're looking for candidates who have 4 to 6, 7 years of experience. Now, not to say that you're not going to be able to get jobs if you fall outside of the range, but just bear in mind that the majority of employers are offering those types of, are seeking candidates with those types of experience, or that level of experience. So if you come in with a little less and you see that great salary average, you may not get that average if you're coming in early. And if you're looking a little bit later, maybe you're not going to be coming out at the professional level that you would hope, because those are the levels of positions that companies are offering. If you do come in with more experience and you don't decide to go through an MBA program, then you're going to probably be looking at more networking that you're doing on your own, more connections that you're making with alumni. And I think that just knowing that there's not necessarily a right time to come back, but there are some advantages at different stages of your career.
Right. In terms of the European experience, where classes can, be maybe 2 years older on average, similar sort of guidelines in terms of applicants and how you're matching their career expectations with their profile?
It looks very similar, right? In an ideal world, we would have an incredibly vast age range, right? We have 23 to 70-year-olds in our MBA, right? There'd be this enormous benefit of sharing life experiences. But what the reality is that we all naturally have to think about is the reputation of our programs is built on many factors, and one of those is the quality of jobs that our graduates get. And so when we're looking at admission decisions, sort of the first step is, do you have the intellectual rigor to handle one of these challenging MBA programs? Are you smart enough? And I would say for the most part, most applicants are if they get deep in the process, right? It's maybe some of you are in it already, it's a really time-consuming process. You sort of don't or shouldn't do it on a whim. The next step is, can we actually help you, right? Because the reason MBA programs, one of the reasons they're so expensive, it's a lot more than the academic curriculum, right? If you went and did a master's in literature in the UK, you'd have a great academic experience and then off you go. Best of luck to you, right? In an MBA, yes, you have an academic experience, but also this deep kind of professional development as well, and that comes at a cost. And so all that is to say, it's irresponsible of us to bring students into our programs who we feel like there's a very small chance we can actually help them reach the career goals that they have. Because then it's frankly just a waste of each party's time and money.
And so when you're sort of in this dialogue with applicants, Sujin, you have a very loyal alumni base that goes well beyond the Midwest and globally. So how do you sort of then look at that alignment with the culture of your school and how that applicant sort of, you could see them contributing to the Ross community and becoming part of that network? What are you looking for?
So a lot of that is done through self-selection. As people interact with us at our events, on campus, they get to get a feel for the culture and they will opt in if they feel like it's a good fit, which I hope students will do with every school. Our alumni and our students are our interviewers as well, so they help us maintain the special culture that we have. And then as we're going through the evaluation process, we are looking for signs of fit, for collaboration, for initiative, for taking leadership. Probably things that every school will say they are looking for as well. Nobody wants someone who is a loner, who is not a team player, who is that me? Excuse me.
That was the loner. They're answering back.
But we're all looking for similar characteristics, leaders who are going to be good collaborators as well. But each school is slightly different, and applicants will only feel that once they interact with alums and students from those schools. If you read our websites, we'll probably even use the very same words to describe our students and our programs. So it's almost indistinguishable. But it really is the interaction that's going to give you more accurate signals for what a school is like.
So, of course, indistinguishable schools and therefore encouraging them to dig beyond that service. Indistinguishable applicants. I mean, there are certain pools that are very well represented. The consultants, the big four, financial services, software engineers. And there you are digging through each of them to find the right applicants. Any advice, Donna, for how those well-represented pools, how an applicant can do a good job to stand out in that pool?
Well, I'm sure this isn't the first time we've heard, admissions process be described as holistic, right? So
it's the second time today.
yeah. I think this is probably true that many schools would tell you that as well. I mean, we this year went with more essays, but shorter essays, in order to allow an applicant to tell us more about various elements of their background. So I'm sure all of us could give you some examples of the types of essays that we're asking, and usually schools ask those, for a reason, because we care about your leadership style or how it's evolving, for example. I think applicants can stand out for so many different reasons. I have a phrase, applicants can shine for different reasons. And, just today I was reading applications in my hotel room this morning, and I saw a woman who had really impressive global experience, but it was through volunteer work that she had done since she was in high school. So, I mean, she definitely stood out in terms of her global exposure, but in a unique way outside of studying abroad or working abroad. I would also say you don't necessarily have to stand out in a unique way to stand out. I think business schools, there are certain profiles that are just really, really appealing, and maybe it is from an investment bank or a consulting firm, and a person did well at the undergraduate level and has good recommendations. They're just sort of your basic bread and butter applicant too, and they can stand out in that way, as well. The interview opportunities at schools are vast, and there's different policies, but people can stand out based on their interview. Some people have a lot of charisma, somebody else might be incredibly thoughtful, somebody else might be a really great decision maker and have a really cohesive story. So even in an interview, the manner in which somebody can stand out can vary.
Right, we'll be coming back to interviews because, of course, you have different approaches to it. Staying with this idea of passions and how they sort of reveal, we had somebody at an event earlier, a couple of weeks ago, who danced for the Bolshoi. And I think the first school that she met, she almost apologized for that. And by the time she'd spoken to 5 or 6 schools, she realized just how powerful, or potentially powerful, that was in terms of, I assume, determination and setting yourself goals to achieve those. So Katie, just in terms of big brother, big sister, tutoring, mentoring, all of the many different things. There's no one thing to do, but also making sure as applicants that we're helping you to understand the role and the impact that you've had. Could you talk to that?
That's right. I think, and to your point, the impact and the proven track record of engagement and value added to an organization. So that could be value that you've provided to a professional organization. It could be value you've added to a community. It could be value that you've added to an extracurricular organization. But we really want to see how you have added value, and then we project that you would add value to our organization and then to the next organization that you would be a part of, because that's what companies want as well. So we're looking for engaged people, and I think this is true for everybody, but we want people who are going to be engaged and feel passionate about what they do. And so whether that's intellectually what you're passionate about or the program that you're going to be attending, we really want to see that you're going to be engaged. And I think that's a way to stand out. So no, there's no particular organization or background, but it's really that you've been able to add value and stand out in your past too.
All right. Tyler, if it's the Goldman Sachs banker that works 85 hours a week and realizes a month before applying to Bocconi and other schools that they've never volunteered for anything and starts walking puppies at the animal shelter, you're gonna see through that, right?
Yeah. I call it the MBA blitz.
The MBA
blitz.
All of a sudden they start signing
flurry
up
of
for
activity.
everything.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So again, back to what you're looking for, whether it was in college or even within a work context, right? Projects that you could take on, but something that just has a deeper sort of substance to it.
So I'm thinking this phrase sort of, we start from where we are, not from where we wish we were, right? And by the time you become an MBA applicant, 95% of your profile is fixed at that point, right? Your profile. These things have happened in the past. Your bachelor's is finished, your GMAT is done, your work experience is moving along. You can't change all of those things. So maybe I'm thinking of it less in the way of, like, these are the sort of activities independent of my work life that I've done, right? You're exactly right. A lot of people work so much that by the time they work and maintain their relationships, there is actually no more time. And that is okay. What you can control moving forward is why you want to do this. Why do you want to leave this prestigious position within Goldman Sachs? Why do you want to make this change? What is your reason? What is your story? What is your motivation? I think that is the power. That is a lot more powerful than saying, oh, I went and spoke to a elementary school class one time about the job that I have, right? That's just a thing you did. It's not really your story. So maybe I'm thinking what you can control is moving forward. What is fixed is in the past, and we really want to know what you think about moving forward.
Right. And if that philosophical note that you've introduced, if we take that a step further, Sujin, perhaps falling into this trap of not just what we wished, but what we then think that you want to hear. That's something that you must confront all the time, isn't it?
Yes, and the advice that all admissions officers will give is tell your authentic story. What do you really want to do? Don't tell us what you think we want to hear. I was just talking to an admissions consultant today who was working with one of her clients who is applying to many business schools, and she said, this applicant wants to be an entrepreneur, but he doesn't want to say that because he thinks it's not the right thing to say in a business school application. So he said, I should say I want to be a consultant, shouldn't I? She said, no, absolutely not. That's just a fallacy that business school is teeing you up to be a consultant or a marketer or an investment banker. It's really about pursuing your passion and using business skills to get you there. And so we'd rather you show your excitement for the thing that you really want to do, and probably the most important thing in that career goals essay or that conversation is knowing what you want to do, so that we have confidence that business school is the right thing to get you to that ultimate goal. It may not be the immediate job after graduating from business school. It could be the job after that or after that. But we want to help you get to your dream job. And we need to know what that is. And business school may be the right thing for you, or maybe some other path might be. So that's the most important thing you can do for yourself. Think really hard about what do you want to do, and share that with us authentically.
And to pick up on Katie's point of, it's not just one reader at Ross or Shell or any of the schools that may or may not pick up on this authentic voice. I mean, you're then having these committee discussions and saying, I don't know, there's something that doesn't quite fit here or doesn't quite sound right. Is that when it reveals itself?
Yes, and if they make it as far as the interview stage, then it kind of comes out there, because when we dig deeper into why do you want to do that career, they don't have a great answer. And then they start to stumble because they don't have that authenticity, that passion for what they've written or what they initially started to say.
Right. So there's that authentic voice of self. Another voice in the application is recommenders.
Right.
And we could dismiss them and say, well, they're all going to say these wonderful, enthusiastic things about the applicant. Schools really don't care. But a great recommendation can make a world of difference, can't it?
I can. I am very partial to recommendations that use stories or vignettes or anecdotes to illustrate their point. I use this example all the time, but I remember reading a recommendation from an investment bank, and it was about a woman who, the point the recommender was making is what a strong team player she was. And rather than just saying she's a really strong team player, he took the time in a pretty brief paragraph to talk about how they're assigned to teams, and she went out of her way to help another team that she was not assigned to, and what an impact she made within her own team, but also with, above and beyond with another team that didn't have the skill set that the other team had. And that was years ago that I read this recommendation, but it illuminates the power of a story or an anecdote or a vignette.
And if 80% of your applicants' recommenders say, well, let me give you a vignette. You know that they're all watching this session this afternoon. It's all about word choice.
Great, I love
right?
vignettes.
Matt, I want to put a caveat on that I don't want applicants to worry about, oh my gosh, now I need to find a recommender who's going to write me a great vignette, or I have to give them the story, feed them the story so that I will stand out. Because you can't control what your recommender is going to say. And if your recommender is really writing the recommendation letter.
Which we want them to do.
Yes. That's me again.
You're making a forceful point. That's why the
That's
microphone.
right. I want to be very emphatic that the recommendation, you shouldn't worry too much about it other than pick someone who knows you well and who will be able to elaborate on things. But we know that you don't have control over how they write. We know that there are a lot of applicants, our international applicants, English is not the first language. We don't expect your recommender to be fluent in English. We don't expect them to know everything that you want to do in life, but it really pays to sit down and have a conversation with them about your goals. So for us, the recommendation is important. That's why we include it, but we only require one because if you're asking another person for a recommendation letter, what we've found is that they don't say anything that different than what the first person says. You kind of have characteristics and work skills that you're going to bring to the MBA program, and it's going to come out in hopefully your most recent position from your most recent supervisor, and that's what you should focus on, finding the right person to tell your story. But for us, we don't weigh it as heavily as other schools might, given the fact that we only have one recommendation letter instead of two.
Right. Presumably Italian recommenders use language like fantastico and nerviosa, but Swedish recommenders might
We
be
should
just
trade
a
jobs.
little bit more, where they say, well, the candidate was quite satisfactory, which in
Right.
Swedish terms is
It's
extraordinary.
fantastic, yeah.
Do you sort of adjust for the international breadth of recommenders?
Yeah, of course. I mean, my feeling about recommendations are, we could read a book, right, and skip the, oh, now the word's failing me. What's the end of a book that's kind of got
Acknowledgements or-
the epilogue? Thank you. The word failed me. And you would have a satisfactory experience of reading that book, right? And if you decide to take the additional step and read the epilogue, there's going to be some little bits of information that will maybe spark something new in your mind, and that's kind of where recommendations kind of sit for me and for us. And we have to be sort of culturally aware of language and recommendations and grasp of the English language depending on the recommender and if that recommendation had to be translated. So I would say it's really out on the margins that the recommendation actually, I would say, has an enormous impact on the final decision. However, we wouldn't ask for them if we didn't use them in some way. And so part of that is, I think an advantage for applicants is that you actually should sit down with someone and talk in a very clear way as to why you want to make this decision and why you are hoping to have their help in this path. Regardless of the decision, that's a really good step for you all to be able to vocalize in a clear way to someone else why you want to take that. So maybe that's less about us and more about you.
Right. And maybe, Katie, as a final comment, we're giving those recommenders the freedom to then share their vignettes or the details that they would like to share. But also mindful that the school has your resume, where you've already identified perhaps a lot of the, what you do. So this is the opportunity perhaps for them to share more insights in terms of what makes you tick, or a value system, or how you work in international teams that may, so working with your recommender, not writing those recommendations for them, which is a challenge, but just giving context perhaps, why school, and so what would your advice be in sort of that conversation with the recommender?
I was going to say that a recommendation usually confirms what we are already putting together through the application. So for us, it's that confirmation or the negation of what we're already feeling about you. As far as the recommendation, I think, and you'll hear this at any advice that you hear people talk about recommendations, somebody who knows you well. The names don't impress us, so names and titles. It's really people who can attest to your professional strengths, who have worked with you. It could be a mentor, it could be a client, it could ideally be a supervisor, but it's really people who know you well And if you do have that conversation with them, they know what you've been able to accomplish, the value that you've been able to add to that organization, and then what your aspirations would be. So I think having that conversation is critical, and giving them enough time to be able to write a good recommendation is important too.
Now, I'm very proud of us as a panel because we've got this far and we haven't mentioned the G. Didn't we do well?
Yes.
Yeah, but there's the four-letter word, it's out there. These GMAT scores just seem to keep going up and up and up. Where does it stop? Why does it keep going up? How does it matter? Donna, do you want to start with the GMAT and maybe give some context?
Sure. I have what may or may not be non-traditional views about this. I think all business schools want to see evidence that a candidate can do well and thrive in their MBA program. Traditionally, there has been an emphasis on undergraduate GPA and now the GMAT and GRE, unless it's different for any other schools. I think in this day and age, there are a multitude of ways people can maybe provide alternative evidence that they can do well academically. So, for example, maybe somebody has completed the CFA or the CPA or certain levels of it. There's a course that I really like that's an online class called HBX Core that is offered by Harvard Business School. There's obviously so many Coursera classes. So I'm really interested in sort of exploring potentially looking at broadening admissions, academic admissions criteria in the future. We're not there yet, but we are undergoing a pretty in-depth analysis at Darden. We are test agnostic, so a candidate can take the GMAT or GRE. We really have no preference on either one. I recommend maybe taking some practice tests to get a sense of which one you might think you're going to perform better on. We did see an increase in GRE test takers this year, so it was about 7% a year ago, and this past year's class it was 17%. But we're test agnostic.
So holistically, of course, Sujin, the GMAT, where it helps you, and maybe perhaps where we can over-focus on it as just one data point in the overall application.
So that's the only data point where we can compare apples to apples. Undergrad experiences, your GPAs, your majors, they're all different. Schools have very different, different programs and approaches. Excuse me, I'm getting over a cold. So the GMAT or the GRE is the one data point that we can compare across all applicants, and we have a long history of knowing at these GMAT ranges that students will be successful in the MBA program. And that's really what we are screening for, that we are admitting students who will be able to do well in the program and not suffer academically. So we're trying to help you and us out by assessing that up front.
Right.
I have
The GMAT does it to the candidates, let alone the admissions officers. So, and any perspectives that change for a European program and?
Wouldn't it be nice if we could just be done with the GMAT or GRE? Everybody sort of seems to get stressed about it. We don't like to talk about it on panels, but okay, we actually live in the world, so this is not going to happen. It's not so different. I mean, the reason we do this is what Sujin said, right? It's the only way, if you are an engineer from Singapore or an author from, Ireland, it's really the only way that we can somehow compare you. But let's say, for those whose English is not their native tongue, you have to submit a TOEFL or an IELTS, right? And there's a certain threshold that, according to that test, says you are fluent in English and able to study in English. And then we meet you, and we might discover your English is perfect or less than perfect, right? It is a test that measures a certain means, but with your grasp of the English language. And the GMAT or the GRE is the same thing, right? It is going to give us some information, but it can't tell us explicitly, are you going to be successful or unsuccessful as an MBA student? The best scenario is you take the test and you make it irrelevant to your application, meaning that the school says, we're comfortable with that score. According to the GMAT or GRE, you are an intelligent person who, in theory, could do an MBA. And now we don't have to think about that anymore, because it's actually not that interesting, right? It's just a number. You just took a test for one day.
Right.
And now we can think about all of those other things. You want us to tell you, and here's the score, right? This is the score, and it's irrelevant. But it's actually not the same, because if your background is in finance or your background is in art history, your grasp of that test is actually going to be different. And so the threshold that we want to see is going to vary a little bit from applicant to applicant, which is why we tend to be a little bit vague when you want us to say, just get a 650 and everything will be fine, right? We can't actually tell you that. So prepare. Hopefully you take it once in your life. That's a 3-hour period. And then we all can just move on and never think about it again.
Well, let's move on.
Can I make one very quick
Katie,
point? I know
please
we're
do.
running low on time, but I think that look at the ranges when you're considering a school. And then the other point is a GMAT may get you into a school, but it may not make you eligible for scholarships. So when you're thinking about what would make you eligible for scholarships, you probably want to get above the average or significantly above the average to put yourself into consideration for merit-based scholarships.
So before we eat the dean's dinner, because they'll be on in a few minutes, I'd like each of you to provide a short. We've talked a lot about what to do, but think about what not to do and some of the classic mistakes. And if you're cold, we'll hold on for just one moment. Tyler talked about when we meet you, and I just wanted to bring in the interview and what that means. Now, at Ross, you have a team-based discussion, which is a little different. Perhaps quickly talk about that, and then
In addition to the one-on-one.
Yeah.
So if you interview on campus or in one of our 4 international locations, you can opt into our team exercise, which is 4 to 6 people working together to come up with and solve a mock business challenge based on words that you're going to be doled out. And so it's random words, you can't prepare. What we're really looking for is not your business knowledge, but how you work with other people and how you communicate. And these people could be from very different disciplines, from different parts of the world, and you're working together in a short amount of time. How do you deal with this ambiguous situation that you can't prepare for, so you can't, it's not like studying for the GMAT where you can take it over and over in practice tests. This is, you come, you don't know what words you're gonna have, and you work together, and then you present. And so what we're really looking for is how do you work with other people, because what you're gonna do in our MBA program and after you graduate is work with other people. And the one thing that we don't get through the one-on-one interview is how you work with other people. We know how you can communicate, but it's really just one-on-one. We want to know how you work with multiple people in an ambiguous situation.
I think it's in these areas. I mean, we talk about the GMAT. Tyler makes the point of GMAT's no fun. It gives us that one data point, and then we're done and we move on from it. Whereas you have fun coming up with the essays that you ask, the interview structure that you provide. So what are those classic mistakes to avoid? Katie, we'll start with you.
Yeah, so I think that one of the things that students come in, and I like to give this advice, that every interaction is an opportunity to make an impression. And so when you are coming on campus or you're interacting with the person who answers the phone or one of our students, if that's a poor interaction, that's going to get back to the admissions committee. So I think people not being aware that every interaction makes a difference in the way that we view you as a candidate.
Right, that's a great place to start. Tyler?
One of the classic mistakes that applicants make is it's actually not as difficult to get into MBA programs as you sitting in this room right now think it is, right? So, okay. My advice, you have your academic reasons for doing an MBA, right? Oftentimes I want to understand finance, I want my professional reasons, my career has hit a plateau, I want to make a change, and oftentimes the applicant stops right there. There's this whole world of these personal reasons that are really interesting and really important and have an enormous weight on our final decision. And so frequently applicants just completely pass these by, right? So just remember those, right? This is yes, it's an academic and professional experience. It's a really deep personal experience that's going to have an enormous effect on your life. So think about those and tell us about those, because that's how we feel who you are from this kind of paper or computer screen.
Right. 2 left, and then the panel's done. Sujin, depending on what you choose, Dawn has then got to scramble and come up with something
Right.
original and fresh. So, Sujin.
don't be afraid to do you. We really want to get to know you. That's what makes applications really stand out. When people try to write essays that sound like the traditional MBA applicant, it's a snooze. We really want to hear the passion in what you want to do, why you want to do this, what you want to get out of it. That makes us excited when you're excited. And so that's going to be the best thing that you can do for yourself. Really understand, what do I want to do? What do I want to get out of this? And share it authentically.
Donna.
I would say don't be underprepared. So if you're going on a job interview with a company, the company is going to expect that you've done some research on the company and the department and what the role is. And it's the same for business school. You want to show that you've done preparation and that you're being really thoughtful about the choices you're making.
Great. All four of you, thank you very much for so much insight and sharing. Thanks to the global audience. Thanks for everyone that will have the chance to meet you.